Cimoooooooo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you a video on the brand new Draitron archetype that's going to be one of the first of many archetypes we will be receiving in the next deck building set sometime later on in the future, Genesis Impact. Now, these deck building sets are reminiscent of stuff like Secret Slayers, which brought with it Adamancipator and Eldritch, and completely warped our competitive format forever. So every time we get one of these sets, I do always want to take notice at the archetypes, and I know we've done like 3 of these archetype review videos within the last week, but Konami just decided to drop all of these on us at once, so I just want to go ahead and discuss them and get those out of the way. Now, ritual archetypes have always fascinated me. They're definitely a relic of 2002, and one of the biggest uphill battles that rituals face is the amount of commitment in terms of card advantage that you have that requires you to summon and go into these ritual monsters, just because you need not only have the specific ritual monster, the specific ritual spell, although those have gotten a lot more generic over the years, you also need to have monsters to be able to fulfill the requirements to get there. And now slowly but surely, ritual support has gotten better, but definitely compared to, more competitive archetypes, it definitely still is a struggle. Now, we've definitely seen the opposite end of that spectrum with stuff like Nekroz being one of the most feared decks of all time, so clearly they know how to make a good ritual archetype if they want to, but definitely by 2020 standards, these decks have a lot that they are going up against. So we're not going to make you guys wait any longer. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So the Draitron archetype artwork is pretty cool, I will admit, and let's go ahead and see what we got here. So we have Draitron Alpha. It is a light machine effect, level 1, 2000 attack, 0 defense. I believe all the effects of these monsters, or all the stats of them are very, very similar, and we'll have to see as that progresses. So each of these monsters has the effect that they cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned with a Draitron cards effect, and you can only use this name's effect once per turn. Also, all the Draitrons have this number 1 effect, but then do something different per each card. So they each have a similar effect that reads, you can tribute one other Draitron monster or one ritual monster from your hand or field, special summon this card from your hand or graveyard in defense position. Then you can add one ritual monster from your deck to your hand. You cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this effect, except monsters that cannot be normal summoned. So one thing that's very interesting to note here is that it doesn't actually lock you out of the extra deck, since every extra deck monster cannot be normal summoned or set. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty unique aspect when it comes to ritual decks, and gives this deck a little bit more flexibility in terms of what you're able to do with it, because at the very least, you could potentially swarm the field with these little guys and start going into some link climbing plays, so that is pretty cool. So this is our ritual monster searcher. This is the Senju, if you will, of the archetype, and you're probably going to be wanting to max out on that just because you want to get to those ritual monsters as quickly as you can. Next up here is Beta. Again, the stats are exactly the same. Light machine effect, level 1, 2000 attack, 0 defense. Again, same restriction where it must be special summoned with a Draitron cards effect, and you can only use the effect once per turn. And again, similar effect as before, you can tribute one other Draitron monster or ritual monster from your hand or field, special summon this card from your hand or graveyard in defense position. Then you can return one of your banished Draitron monsters to the graveyard. You cannot special summon except the turn you activate this effect, except for normal summoned or set. So this allows you to get some of your banished resources back into the graveyard. This one's like okay, you might maybe want to run like one of this, but that's not nearly as good as being able to search a ritual monster. So let's see what else we got here. So this is Draitron Gamma. Again, same stats, light machine effect, level 1, 2000, 0. So you can tribute one other Draitron monster or ritual monster. You can special summon it from your hand or graveyard in defense. Then you can special summon one Draitron monster with 2000 attack from your graveyard, except another copy of Gamma, and then it has the same limitations as well. So this is a really good one. Getting these into the graveyard isn't difficult if you are getting these out of your hand through their own effects, and then you can bring them back with Gamma. That gives you another monster to work with, possibly maybe for some link plays or maybe some ritual plays, so you're able to recoup a lot of the advantage, and this is kind of along the lines of what ritual support needs to have at the moment if it wants to have any chance of being competitively viable. Let's move on along here. This is Draitron Delta. Same stats as before, same effect for the most part. So you can special summon it from your hand or graveyard in defense position by tributing another Draitron or ritual. Then you can reveal one ritual monster or ritual spell from your hand to draw one card. So that's pretty good. I mean, if you're going to use the card anyway, giving your opponent the information does not matter. It does require you to already have the card in hand, but, you know, if you go up here with Alpha, Alpha can search one, so, I mean, that's pretty easy to trigger, and and getting free draws is pretty much what every deck would love to have, so I think that one's pretty good. Again, it is a little bit conditional, but free draws, I'm not gonna, complain about that at all. Next up, we have Zeta. Same stats as before, same effect for the most part. So again, you can tribute another Draitron or ritual monster from your hand or field, special summon this from your hand or graveyard in defense position. Then you can add one ritual spell from your deck to your hand. There we go. So this is the Sonic Bird of the archetype. I know I'm going old school with those references, but this and Alpha are probably going to be 3-ofs. The one that's special summoned from the grave, you're probably going to want to play a couple copies of this. And then Beta and Delta, I definitely think are going to be like lesser played. This one draws cards though, so I mean, you still might want to play that just because that's really good. But now let's get to the ritual monster itself. Wow, that is some really, really cool artwork. One thing ritual cards, I believe, always have going for it is that they have some really, really solid artwork. I'm looking at you, Hungry Burger. Anyway, so we have Draitron Meteorness equals DRA. That's a really weird name, but it's a light machine effect ritual, level 12, 4,000 attack and defense. That's some pretty big stats. You can ritual summon this card with Meteorness Draitron. You can only use this card's name third effect once per turn. I'm assuming this is the ritual spell. Your opponent cannot target this card with monster effects. I wish it just said you couldn't target it, period. I hate that it's specifically monster effects, but I guess that's fine. If this card was ritual summoned using monsters whose total levels equal 2 or less, which all of these are, I think they're all level 1 for the most part. Yep, looks like it. So if you ritual summon total levels equal 2 or less, so I mean, I think you have to only use 2 of it total to summon it. It can attack all opponent's special summon monsters once each. Well, that's pretty cool. That's like an Ultimate Conductor Tyranno effect. The thing is, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno is much easier to bring out and doesn't require you to like fulfill a condition before you can even use that effect after already ritual summoning it. So this is like one of the downsides of cards like this, is that when they make you jump through extra hoops when you're already playing a ritual deck. But anyway, third effect reads, during your opponent's turn as a quick effect, you can banish any number of monsters from your graveyard whose total attack equals 2,000 or 4,000. So that's 1 or 2 if you're talking about the little guys. Then target a face-up card your opponent controls for every 2,000 attack. Send it to the graveyard. That's pretty cool. It does target, but however, it sends to the graveyard. I wish it didn't care about if it was face-up or not, so then you could go after back row, but cool way to get your opponent's threats off the board. It banishes them so they have no way of getting them back. Doesn't negate effects or anything, which I think is pretty problematic if this is like your end game boss monster, but pretty cool effect nonetheless. But I definitely think that, this is one of the things. When you're playing a deck like this, these cards need to have such an impact because of the commitment, because you're already playing a ritual card itself. And, when you look at it in that scope, I don't really feel like this does enough. As crazy as this card seems, it's just not doing it for me. So let's keep going though. Maybe there's other cards here. So we have Draitron Fafnir. This is a field spell. You can only activate one of this card's name per turn. When this resolves, you can add a Draitron spell or trap from your deck to your hand, except another copy of itself. So it's not any card, it's only a spell or trap. So let's see what else we get later. The effects of ritual spell cards and their effects cannot be negated. That's pretty cool. That's almost like a Magical Meltdown, but for rituals, so that's neat. Once per turn, if a monster is normal or special summon face up while you control a Draitron monster, you can decrease the levels of those face up special summon monsters by 1 for every 1,000 attack they have, minimum 1 for the rest of this turn. I think that's definitely supposed to be synergizing like with this effect up here. But overall, I think you would play this, depending on what else we can search with this, that's why you would play this, but also the ritual spells not being able to be negated is actually pretty good, considering, we're in a format of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you're assembling, multiple negations on a board. This card could actually be one of the reasons why this deck is any bit playable. So now let's go to the ritual spell. This is Meteorness Draitron, a ritual spell card. It can be used to ritual summon any ritual monster. You can only use the second effect once per turn. It's kind of cool that it doesn't specifically need you to ritual summon the big dude. It can be any ritual monster. Tribute machine monsters from your hand or field whose total attack equal or exceed the attack of the monster you ritual summon. And if you do, ritual summon that ritual monster from your hand or graveyard. So what's interesting is that ritual monsters have in the past typically required you to meet the expectations for their level. But this requires you just to have the attack exceed or be equal to what you're summoning. And that's kind of a cool twist on rituals. Is it enough? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it, but it's cool that they're kind of deviating away from the traditional means that ritual monsters have worked before. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target one Draitron monster you control. It loses exactly 1,000 attack until your opponent's turn, and if it does, add this card to your hand. So that's pretty cool. It's a very easy way for you to get this card back if you're playing this whole archetype, and you're always going to have the ritual spell. You could get it to the graveyard to bring it back that way. There's so many different ways to get access to that, so that's pretty neat. Next up, we have Draitron Nova, a normal spell card. You can only activate one of this card's name per turn. You cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this card, except monsters that cannot be normal summoned or set. Special summon one Draitron monster from your deck, but destroy it during the end phase. So being able to get into any of these is pretty cool. They can be summoned off of other Draitron cards, which is nice. So it's basically an emergency teleport just to get you into one of these, kind of get you set up, and it's a cool way just to get some basic setup just to be able to pull off any of these crazy ritual plays. Next up here is Draitron Eclipse, another normal spell card. You can only use this card's first and second effects once per turn each. Target a Draitron monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. Okay, so like a mini salvage type effect. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, banish it from your graveyard, then target a Draitron monster you control. It gains 2,000 attack until the end of your opponent's turn. I mean, that's fine. I guess it's a pretty significant number of damage. That's like a quarter of your opponent's life points, but again, that's not really that great. This one is probably the least impressive out of the, spells we've looked at so far. It's okay. I mean, you get to get the cards back, so it's fine. Now I have a quick play spell, Draitron Asterism, so it's a quick play. You can only activate one of this card's name per turn. During the main phase, target a Draitron monster or a ritual monster you control, and one face-up monster your opponent controls. The target you control loses exactly 1,000 attack until the end of your opponent's turn, and if it does, destroy that opponent's monster. So, again, we have this gimmick where you're like making your own monsters lose attack power. In this case, you get to destroy something, so it's technically a 1-for-1. Unfortunately, it destroys and targets, which is like, come on, right? I mean, that's like really not that great. It's fine, but again, you have to get access to this card. I guess you can search it with the with this card, or not this card, the field spell. So I guess you can have some access to it, but it's okay. I don't think it's like anything too great. Like, it's fine. It's an okay card. And then this might be the last one here. This looks like the counter trap Draitron Meteor Shower. Again, I'm loving this artwork. This is cool. You can only activate one of this card's name per turn. When your opponent would normal or special summon a monster while you control a ritual monster, negate the summon, and if you do, shuffle that monster into the deck. Now, this is really good. What's interesting here is that this is actually generic. You don't have to play Draitron to play this. You do play the field spell if you want to access multiple copies of it. Although the field spell prevents all ritual spell cards from not being able to be negated, so that's pretty neat. But it not only negates the summon, it also shuffles it into the deck, which is nice, so that way there's no way they can do anything with it in the graveyard or anything like that. That's a pretty solid card. I mean, it's still a bit iffy because the only way to really get to it is the field spell for the most part, but it's not bad. Overall, what are my thoughts on this archetype? Again, I definitely think ritual monsters still have the problem where you're having to commit so many resources to these monsters that the ritual monsters themselves have to be so utterly broken to be worth the card commitment. Otherwise, it's just not worth playing. I mean, Necroz is obviously like what a lot of people deviate to when it comes to this type of thinking, but look how powerful the Necroz were. Trishula banished 3 cards. Unicor was a walking skill drain for cards from the extra deck. Brio could bounce monsters back. Like the cards in that deck were so powerful, but then also had utility outside of just being ritual monsters. Like Trish prevented stuff from being targeted. Val could end battle phases. You had so much different interaction and synergy between the archetypes that, I feel like it's kind of hard to top something like that. And this is one of the things that ritual cards kind of have to balance out on their power scale, but unless it's really tipped towards like the broken side, I think it's really difficult to justify seeing an archetype like this in competitive play because, yeah, what's nice is that the little monsters don't preclude you from using the extra deck, so like maybe there's the potential to go into some certain plays like involving stuff like Appaloosa by chance. So if your end board's like Appaloosa plus the big 4K attacker guy that can also banish cards, like that's not a terrible end board. But again, how well can this deck also fare going second? You know, I feel it's going to be very difficult for this deck to really do anything up against some of the big top tier threats, and even when we get this archetype several months down the road, the ban list is going to have to shift things dramatically for an archetype like this to really have much of a chance whatsoever. I think it's like possible if there's just an absolute massacre on the next ban list, but I'm not really optimistic that that's going to happen given the circumstances of everything going on. There's still some cool things you can do here, right? I mean, the archetype is comprised of all light monsters, and I immediately think Invoked anytime I see light, and it doesn't require you, just because you can't normal or special summon in certain instances, you can still do like a normal summon, and then everything else is after the fact, so that's pretty nice. You can get like Mechaba, because you can still summon Mechaba, because that's a card that cannot be normal summoned or set, so you can still play these like normal summon type cards and have some other synergies outside of the archetype, because it doesn't restrict you into only Draitrons. So there's potential, right? But I think there's a lot of ifs and hoops that not only the archetype has to jump through, but almost the format itself has to jump through to allow an archetype like this to exist. And looking at the big boss monster and the fact that I don't really feel that the payoff is necessarily there, I'm really not thinking this archetype's going to do much of all, but we'll have to see. Obviously, a lot can happen in 3 or 4 months, depending on when we do get this set, so I'll be very curious to see what happens. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.